So we're on the last step of immutable CRUD operations. We have implemented our create, read, update, so we're just missing that delete. So let's go and add a delete method, which is going to accept a donut that we want to then delete. I'm going to call this the payload as well, so we can then go and use an immutable operation to go and remove it from our donuts data structure. Now to do this, all we are going to do is pass up the donut that we want to delete. And in the same way here, how we have the ID check, we essentially want to do the same thing again. So we can say this.donuts equals the result of calling this.donuts. Now instead of using map, we're going to use filter. Filter then gives us each individual donut, which is of type donut. We then want to check whether the donut ID that we are currently iterating over does not equal that of the payload.id that we are then given through the function arguments. This is then going to iterate over each particular item, and when it then comes back, we should then have an array, and it will then not include this particular item if it is in fact found. So if the donut ID does not equal the one that we want to delete, we keep it, otherwise we delete it. Following this, we then need to go and implement our this.donuts, so we can then reflect those changes in our application and see things out when we save. So now that we've added the functionality for this, we can go and start to implement it inside of our form. Again, this is an immutable operation, so we're following some very nice patterns still. So we've got create, we've got update. So now we also want to implement a delete. So I'm going to take our create button, we're going to have update and then delete. We're going to leave it as type of button. And instead of create, we're going to have handle delete. Now we're not going to pass any arguments for this. We're going to simply just call our delete function. I'll explain why in a moment. But first, let's change over our text to delete. So we now need to go and implement a handle delete method. We can say handle the delete. This, of course, accepts no arguments because we just need to tell the parent which component we want to delete. The way that we can do this is by creating another output. So again, we can duplicate our event emitter. We're going to change this over to a delete event, which then emits a donut as well. So all of them emit donuts. One creates them, one is the updated, and one is the one that we'd want to delete. So this is in fact really nice, and this allows us to then simply emit to the parent this.delete.emit. Now all we want to do is pass up the donut that we want to emit. Now to stay immutable, we're going to spread our this.donut into a new object, just to copy those values across, and then pass them up to our parent component. But this is going to delete things right away. So you could use a different component for this, but we're going to use if confirm. Now this is a function available to us on the window, and we can add some text inside, really delete, and then we're going to pass in this.donut, because remember we can access these properties, .name. So we're going to ask the user if they really want to delete that particular item. If they do, then we can in fact close off our if statement, and we'll end up with something like this. So we can save this out. We then have our delete button. We hit delete and we have really delete Sour Supreme. We could then press cancel, which does absolutely nothing. We could then press OK, which then emits the event. But of course, inside of our single component, we're not listening to the delete event. So if we say, I want to listen to the delete, we're then going to have an onDelete method, which is then listening as well for our $event. So we've got create, update, and we can also have onDelete, which expects the donut. Of course, it's of type donut. And we can say this donut service, go and delete that particular donut. So this should now take us full circle. We can press delete, press OK, and this is now deleted things. However, to see this change reflected in our service, we can then open up our DevTools and we have an array with 4 items in. And you can see that our Sour Supreme is no longer available inside because our filter is removing those particular items. So now we're pretty much set up to achieve anything we want. We have full CRUD operations. We've got C for CRUD, R for read all or read a single item. We then have our update and also our deletion. So now that these are all implemented, we now have some local state management, which is then shared throughout all of our components in our single page application. So what's next? We need to hook these up to some API requests and start saving these data changes. So anytime we request data or set the data, we're then going to, inside of a successful callback, we're going to then change the state in our application. So we've actually managed the state beforehand. So then all we need to do is essentially make an HTTP request around this. And when it then successfully comes back, we can update the state accordingly upon a success. So with that in mind, let's jump into the next lesson.